On this episode of Star Trek Universe, we are talking about, well, in general, the 765874 OTOY shorts, specifically, though, or I guess I should say including, the newest one that just dropped, Unification, for the 30th anniversary of Star Trek Generations, which features the return of Leonard Nimoy's Spock and William Shatner's James T. Kirk. We'll be talking about that right after these words from our mystery sponsors.
Welcome to Star Trek Universe, the podcast where you get to listen in on two lifelong friends sit and chat about Star Trek. My name is Matthew Carroll.
I am David C. Robertson.
Yeah, man. So we have seen these shorts.
Yes,
these dealios.
Right.
So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on these things?
Okay.
I know you've done more reading on them and stuff. I watched them, but to me it seems like just really good tech on how they are putting these characters into these situations. Like really good looking for the most part. There were a couple moments where it felt a little like the faces were a little wobbly to me, but for the most part, really good.
Yeah, for the most part, it's really good. And to clarify, these shorts have came out and started coming out in 2022 as part of the Roddenberry Archive. The company creating them is OTOY. It is Paramount licensed. It's not a fan film. I've seen people, kind of shitting on it, being like, it's a fan film. It's not quite a fan film. I don't know how canonical it is.
Right, I doubt it's canonical. I would not guess or call it canonical, but it sounds like they're licensing it somehow.
Here's the thing, though. It's really interesting to me that, like, first of all, like, they have Yeoman Colt from The Cage. She was Pike's yeoman in the pilot episode of Star Trek. Yeah. We have her, we see her like touching something in like looks like some sort of gel field or something. And we see her going through time. We see her getting mind melded with Spock. We still don't know exactly what the hell that is, because we've been seeing that forever. And they keep showing us little snippets of it every time they do another one of these.
Yeah, I noticed that. I didn't know who that was. Like, I mean, that is such a deep cut from an actress who didn't make it to the show, who's only in the pilot and only an ensign or whatever. Like, you would say she was the yeoman?
Yeoman, yeah, the yeoman. So 765874 is Yeoman Colt's serial number from the Marvel comic book Star Trek Early Voyages from the 90s.
Wow. Okay.
Now, this is exciting, though. I don't understand it. I don't know what they're doing exactly.
I feel like someone that works for OTOY just has a friend that looks like Yeoman Colt, and they were like, we could make this. We just gotta, we'll make her the main character.
Dude, I don't know, like, because they have, like, when you go to their YouTube, they have, like, test shots of her and the stand-in for Nimoy, who looks so much like Nimoy, they barely need anything.
Oh, wow.
So they've got, like, test footage of them talking motion picture era.
Oh, interesting.
They've got pictures of her with movie era Spock and the Maroon Monster, and they're standing with Kirk, but Kirk is wearing a black shirt with a blue tie that matches specifically a Star Trek Early Voyages comic book.
Wow.
Like, okay, so there's a storyline that this appears to be kind of very inspired by, all right, where Yeoman Colt, because Early Voyages, the comic book, featured Pike and the crew from The Cage in adventures after The Cage and before the original series. It was basically Strange New Worlds, but in comic book form in the 90s. And there's a series of issues from issue 12 to 15 where Colt, she picks up this ball, this orb, this artifact, and they see the future in it, and she gets pulled into it. And she's experiencing alternate realities, and one of the alternate realities that she experiences is she gets trapped in this future, like during the movie era, but Pike is still captain of the Enterprise. You know the shot that you see in this film of the Cage era Enterprise, like in a museum?
Yeah.
That shot is specifically from the comic.
All right.
The bit where she walks up to the giant black eye pond on that mountain, that is the Well of Tomorrows. That is from this fucking comic, man.
That is so weird.
To get back home, she dives back into this thing.
Okay, so it's not like they're just adapting this comic. Are they doing that, you think, in like full movie form or something?
It looks like they're working on something because they've been slowly grinding this out and we don't hear anything, and then all of a sudden they'll drop something else.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say, I watched Dune this week for the first time. I watched both Dunes. I got real Dune vibes from this thing.
Really?
Like the tone of it, like, and that may just be the trailer style tone of it, but like the way the soundscape was set, the sort of slow moving cameras, lots of close-ups of feet and hands. It also reminds me of things like Gladiator, but just because Dune is fresh on the mind, like it reminded me a lot of Dune, and the way they were using like whatever that Well of Tomorrow is in Dune. There's a lot of technology that's like very organic, earth looking, stuff like that. So it just watching this, and then him walking into that Kirk walking in and seeing the three versions of himself and having like this vision and the reflection being different, that just all felt so much like Dune to me. Just the way it was filmed and the way it was tonally, I guess. Not like, storyline wise or something. I don't know.
Yeah, like I've seen trailers for Dune, but I haven't watched Dune. What it felt like to me was very original series movies. Like it felt very, very like those movies had an air of mysticism about them. Yeah,
they definitely do. I mean, I feel like especially the original series had an air of mysticism to it, just all in general, and I think that's somewhat continued, but a little less so in the Next Generation era.
Oh, definitely. So that's what I'm picking up here, but so yeah, in the comic book, when Colt gets to the alternate future, Pike is in charge of the Enterprise A, and Kirk is a pirate. And what is he wearing? The same black shirt with the blue tie. And we haven't seen the footage for that yet. We've only seen pictures on the website of that.
Weird. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that sounds like a fun story to see like an alternate Kirk who, didn't end up as the captain, ended up as a scoundrel pirate. Like that would be Kirk as Han Solo basically would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's what it was. Like, yeah. So they also showed Gary Mitchell. They actually got Gary Lockwood to come back and do motion capture. Like, he's old as hell, but they got him to come back in and do motion capture for him to play Gary Mitchell floating in space staring at that sun.
That scene looked really good.
And that is almost like verbatim from a Star Trek number 400, A Perfect System, right before Gary Mitchell encounters the God Killer. He survived in a godlike form after where no man has gone before, and then this God Killer comes and takes him down. But I just think it's interesting that they're bringing in all of these different things from quote unquote non-canon sources. Yeah. And I don't know what they're getting at, because, we see Kirk in this new one, in this Unification that they just put out. We know he's dead. We see Spock up on the mountain take his comm badge. Mm-hmm. Kirk is walking around in this forest with no comm badge. Comes to a clearing. There's all these people, including Saavik and the son of Saavik and Spock from Vulcan Heart, which was a novel.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you recall this, but in Star Trek 4, there were lines that were deleted where Kirk was supposed to say, shouldn't Spock know about his son? Because Saavik helped him through Pon farr in Star Trek 3. So in Star Trek 4, they were going to say that he had impregnated Saavik. And she's like, no, he's not himself yet. And, you guys, I'll tell him later or whatever. So there was a little more extra meaning behind that longing shot, that long shot of her just like, or it's a close-up shot, but she's has this look of longing when they're flying off on Vulcan. Mm-hmm. Because she knows that she's pregnant with his child. But Leonard Nimoy wasn't okay with that. He felt a little weird about like Spock being like a deadbeat dad or some shit. So they cut it. But years later, they wrote this novel where that she wasn't pregnant then, but they wound up getting together later down the line and having a son.
Okay.
So for whatever reason, they decided to include that here. But I think it's interesting they brought in, like, they basically lead Kirk to this clearing where freaking Yor from Star Trek Discovery is. Do you remember this character?
Right. Okay. I did not remember this character, but I was like, that is modern costumes. Who is Yor?
Yor was a time agent from the Kelvin universe who like came over into the Prime timeline and was like masquerading as an officer in Starfleet during like TNG era. Dr. Kovich had a hologram of him and was talking about him, like how he was this time agent. So
okay, he's just a hologram, not. We didn't see I just don't remember that.
Right.
I remember Kovich. I vaguely remember Kovich mentioning the Kelvin timeline.
Yep. And that's
like that's what it was. Okay. Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. One thing that's interested me. Okay, it interested me when we first saw these shorts. The first one, I believe, is the one with Spock. The first one I saw was the one with Spock on Veridian 3. And what interests me, like I said it at the time, that's the beginning of the book series we loved when we were teenagers. The ones that written by Shatner, sort of.
Judith and Garfield Reeve Stevens for real, but yeah.
Shatner's names on them. But we read them, and The Return and Ashes of Eden and The Return start with him there, visiting the site of Kirk's death. And now, knowing that what they're doing is pulling from all these sources of non-canon books and comics and all these things, I'm like, could that be the beginning of Ashes of Eden? Like, could they actually be doing one of those stories? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but it seems kind of, possible.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to go there with it. There's so much to that, and it's taken them so long just to crank out what they have. But right. I still think it's interesting. And I like I guess I like the idea of, kind of grabbing a vague alternate history tale and kind of updating it for Yeoman Colt and being like, okay, well, she's got to be this like the connecting tissue, for all these little for the storyline.
Well, that's the thing, if they can cast Colt, as I mentioned earlier, as a person, like that they don't have to CGI every frame of her face, then like. They could a little more easily tell a Star Trek story and have her weave in and out of like the lives of the characters we know and have those moments that are amazing to return those characters, but like not have to have every moment CGI'd in every scene, Yeah.
Did you notice that sometimes she's wearing like a Cage era uniform and then other times she's wearing a Kelvinverse uniform?
No, I didn't catch that.
There's a little box on Spock's nightstand on his deathbed, and that was in Star Trek Beyond. That was delivered in a box of personal effects from old Spock who had died. It was delivered to Zachary Quinto's Spock in the Kelvinverse. If you'll recall, old Spock dies on New Vulcan in the Kelvin universe.
Yeah.
So young Spock got it, and when he opens it, it's a picture of the movie era crew. It's specifically a promo photo from Star Trek V, but it's the original crew together. And old Spock had a picture of that. So in one of these, we see Colt in the Kelvinverse uniform in old Spock's quarters, picked that shit up off of his nightstand. I don't know why. They never get into that. We know that he mind melds with her somewhere because we saw the clip of him mind melding with her.
Well, we know this character from Discovery can jump across timelines, apparently, some sort of time agent. And we know that, like... So,
he delivered Kirk's comm badge back to him before everything turns black and he faces himself.
Okay.
That's what Yor gave him.
All this context is important for me. I'm gonna need to rewatch that whole thing because I was like, these look like cool shots, and they've all got so much of the crew and in these different contexts and different uniforms and places, and half of it I don't know what's going on. I did catch that this was Spock's death, and it was Kirk visiting Spock at his death, which was very cool. And I'm assuming that could be like one of the things that happens in whatever this project is.
Yeah. I mean, well, okay, so we saw Spock pick up the comm badge off of Kirk's grave. So he's got Kirk's comm badge. He apparently gives it to Yor at some point, and Yor takes it back to Kirk and transports him to the Kelvinverse.
Okay.
So that he could be with Spock. I don't know.
Right. Something like that. That happened in the thing, or that's your supposition?
That happened in the thing.
Okay. I did not catch that. But I did not see, I didn't know what was going on with the Kelvinverse and Yor and all that. This is wild. This is a wild and deep, interesting storyline, especially if they jump back and forth between the Kelvinverse and the Prime timeline.
Yeah.
And like, who knows if there'll be any Kelvinverse actors portrayed in this too,
Yeah. Did you notice that Colt is... at some point she's in a Kelvinverse uniform, but she is staring at the exact same X-rays of Kirk's body that was in the Section 31 base in Star Trek Picard Season 3.
No, I didn't see that. So that...
Yep.
Oh, I did catch that scene, but I didn't really remember what it was. So that might... So maybe she actually goes and like reanimates him or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's wild. It's wild, man. This is very wild, and I'm interested, but I'm also, I don't know. Like, it's so weird. It's hard to be interested. It's hard to be excited for it because I don't know. Like, based on the trailer, we've heard no real dialogue that wasn't just like archive audio.
I assume that's because it's got to be really hard to get that right.
Right. So we'll see where this goes. If they're really working on something and cooking, like, I'd love to see it, but. The thing about this kind of creation, it can be beautiful, but like you can make someone look just like William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. You can't like make them act just like William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, So it's going to be interesting. I mean, like they look good. They're making the faces that make me feel like they're portraying this thing, but like, is the timing going to be right? Is the voice going to be right? Is all? I assume they'll be able to get the voice right. These days, voice technology is really, really doable to get somebody's voice pattern and reproduce it. But still, the performances, the delivery, I just don't know. In context, like, are they going to use voice actors to like do the voice, and then it's like remapped with Kirk and Spock's voice? Like, I just don't know. Like, I'm interested in this because it seems weird and cool and like a new frontier for Star Trek stuff. If it's officially licensed, but it's kind of a different company making their own thing that's like not real canon. I don't know. It seems interesting. It's weird.
If they there are already AI things out there where you can basically upload a lot of samples of someone's voice, and then
for sure
speak, record, and then like turn your audio into that person's voice. And a lot of that stuff is free and it's still dodgy. But if they actually had money behind it, I don't know. I think they could.
I'm sure there are better versions of that are available to like people with money.
But yeah, that was Sam Witwer doing Kirk's body, and they were putting Shatner's face onto Sam Witwer's head.
Sam Witwer, remind me. Is he the guy
from Liberty on Supergirl?
Oh, okay, I know him well.
I think he's in Star Wars as well.
Star Wars. I know him well from Star Wars Rebels, as he played Maul and a bunch of other Star Wars animation characters. I don't know why, but he's always on my like TikTok For You feed or whatever. He's always on there talking about his different Star Wars experiences. And honestly, I see it like the Kirk stuff where he is playing with his eyebrows and moving his face. I kind of see the Sam Witwer in there, like the performance. That's cool. I like that.
But yeah, I just thought this was amazing, and I don't know where they're going with the Yeoman Colt stuff. I think it's really cool that they grabbed so much from early Voyages. I always want to call it New Voyagers, but it's early Voyages. Stu sent us some feedback for the Lower Decks episode that we're going to talk about soon, but he said, I caught this PS, and I was like, oh, he's talking about the Unification fan film, so we'll talk about that here. He says, should I watch that Unification fan film? It is not a fan film. It is specifically, it is executive produced by Rod Roddenberry, just same as all the other Star Trek stuff that's coming out. Paramount licensed it. It might be, it might be...
not canon.
Somewhat uncanon, but I don't think they're going to go back and touch on Kirk, so they might as well do it here and just leave it alone, as far as old Kirk goes.
Right. Well, I mean, except for, the current Kirk on Strange New Worlds.
Right.
They're definitely going to go back and touch on Kirk.
Yeah, they'll definitely do that.
Forever and ever, but this is something different.
Right. Stu says, I don't really like the idea of it for many reasons. You haven't watched it. Primary one being, I'm tired of everyone thinking they need to do over stuff to give closure to things. Okay, in this case, I'm going to say I'm glad to have that image in my head of Kirk and Spock together as Spock dies.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful.
Stu says, no, Wesley Snipes doesn't need a fourth Blade movie to finish his story. No, we don't need Luke Skywalker recast with his performance capture double or Sebastian Stan. Just so we can painstakingly cover his Jedi Master years in live action. And I don't need to see Kirk's ghost hanging around to wait for Spock to die, because some of y'all are really weird about this fictional friendship, and the window scene from Wrath of Khan somehow isn't enough for you. Plus, given that I know Nimoy wasn't on the best of terms with Shatner when he passed, the meta-ness of the idea feels a little not entirely considerate of him. Okay, so to be clear, Stu, this was done not just by William Shatner, but this was also done by the Nimoy estate and Nimoy's widow. Okay, so they are honoring the friendship that the two men had before they had their falling out that may have actually reconciled, and probably would have reconciled had Nimoy lived.
But it also doesn't really, it doesn't sound like Shatner's really involved in this anyway.
No, he is.
Oh,
he absolutely is.
Oh, is he?
Absolutely.
I just know he's not being. I mean, is he in what capacity?
It is. He is paying for it, and the Nimoy estate is paying for it. Not completely, but they're partners in this thing. The Shatner's company and the Nimoy estate are both in conjunction with this, with OTOY and the Roddenberry Archives, and somewhat Paramount.
Okay.
And Rod Roddenberry's involved as well.
Interesting.
But importantly, these characters mean more and transcend than some petty argument that, Nimoy and Shatner had in their 80s.
Yeah. I think it's, we can say, I get the reticence to let it, it doesn't really matter. I don't really care about the arguments they had, but just anyone using someone's likeness and trying to ape their performance after they're dead is weird. It's always going to be a little weird. I mean, I say it's always going to be a little weird. It's going to happen more and more often. I generally agree with Stu, the idea that just recast stuff, just redo it. I'm not, because at some point it's not them playing it. I'm looking at these pictures of Sam Witwer on set, and Sam Witwer's awesome. And you can tell he's really invested in making Kirk right. And he is an actor who has specialized in motion capture stuff. So I don't know, it's an interesting project for him, but I generally think that we do need to move on from the actors that originated things, because I think it's just at some point you're not getting reinterpretations of things. You're just always aping what the previous people did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand that. And, like if we're doing something like what they're currently doing in Star Trek with alternate realities and we're just going to go back and like say, oh, it happened a little differently, which they're clearly doing. Fine, recast it. But, at the same time, if we're talking about the prime timeline, the original timeline, and we're like specifically wanting to go back and revisit those images and those people, and we're in a situation where Nimoy had said they can use his likeness if they wanted to. His widow was sitting there going, you can use it. Let's all do this. Shatner saying, let's do this. He was involved in it. He was the first on the list, on the acting list when the credits came up. It was like William Shatner and then Sam Witwer. They literally held a screening to watch this thing with Shatner there. I'm okay with it as long as everyone's okay with it, and clearly the fans are usually mostly okay with it, unless they don't understand the specifics of what's happening, and then they want to hop on some moral high horse. But I think it's fine if everyone's going, yeah, okay, let's do this. This is cool. I don't know, and the short meant a lot to me. It was infinitely more meaningful to me than the pittance we got in Generations, where, Leonard Nimoy read the script and said, there's no reason for me to be here. And Rick Berman was like, tough titty. Like, no, Spock should be around for Kirk's death. Like, fuck you. And vice versa. Like, I don't know. I like what they did here, and I'm very interested to see what else they do. Yeah.
It's definitely interesting. I will have to reserve judgment until I see like actual stuff that happens on the screen with acting and with voices and all that. Like that's the thing that will sell me. It looks really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with this being a short film. I don't need like a bunch of dialogue or whatever, like, for this.
Oh, yeah.
I thought this was fine. I am curious to see what else they're doing with it, because I thought this was over last year. I was like, well, this is kind of a cool series of vignettes. I don't know what it means.
Right.
But I'm ultimately still there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I am too.
All right.
Obviously, it seems like they have a lot more they want to do, which is interesting, but I don't know where it leaves us, And
they're taking great pains to include Discovery stuff and Picard stuff and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, so that is very, very strange. To be like, hey, we're gonna. I mean, like, I love it as a person who loves kind of all Trek in one way or another. Like, but I guess I see the Venn diagram of people who know Kovich and Discovery, and the people who are like, no, we need the original actors to be on the screen. You know what I mean? Like, we need the visages of the original actors. I feel like those Venn diagrams are not overlapping. So it feels almost like if they're going to do this and make this for those fans, they wouldn't also try to like pull in stuff from Discovery and TNG and Kelvin timeline, but they are. And so it sounds like it might be something that's really being made for us, which I love.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, we just wanted to hop on and comment on that. We'll be back in a couple days with some Lower Decks coverage. We missed last week because their schedules were just wild, but we'll be back in a couple days with covering those 2 Lower Decks episodes. Peace. Julian True.
Live long and prosper.
Thank you for listening to the Star Trek Universe Podcast, a Stranded Panda production. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv for his web videos. If you'd like to hear more from Matthew Carroll, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or listen to his music. Just search for Matthew Carroll anywhere you get music.